How does one river affect the expansion of an empire? How do two continents affect the future of another? What is required to make the ideal country? How did this channel get its name? Well, let's dive into it on today's episode of Geopol. Location. Sure, we may think of today's political unions or countries as being defined by their shared culture, beliefs, or just created by a foreign power. But back then, and still now, a country and its culture was defined by where it was and what was around it. Let's look at some examples. Take, for example, Egypt. The Nile River was, and still is, the lifeblood of Egypt. The Nile's ability to allow for agriculture in an otherwise infertile land allowed the Egyptians to dominate the area around the Sinai. To this day, 95% of Egypt's population live in the Nile Valley. Egypt was also lucky enough to be connected to the Mediterranean and Red Sea, enabling them to have trade with far-off lands. Also, Egypt's neighbors played a large role in defining what it meant to be Egyptian. The main outsiders were the Arabs, who brought with them Islam, the Arabic language, and, Arabs. To this day, Egyptians see themselves as Arabs, with their country being called the Arab Republic of Egypt. Now let's have another look at another country, Italy. The Italian peninsula is located smack dab in the middle of the Mediterranean. So when the Romans began becoming a military society, it became pretty clear who would have the greatest impact on the entire Mediterranean. But the sea was not all that defined Rome. The Rhine and the Danube River formed Rome's northern border, the ocean their western, and the desert defined their southern and eastern border. Alright, enough ancient examples, let's look at something recent. How about the country me and 80% of my viewers come from, the United States? Ever wonder why it has become the superpower it is today? Well, its native population may not have developed technologically because of lack of contact with the old world. This would prove helpful for Europeans when they discovered it, as disease would reduce the natives to barely a thorn in their side in terms of their colonization of the continent. Now, all of the New World would allow for Europe to grow into the most powerful continent shortly after its discovery with its vast wealth. But let's focus on America. Unlike the frozen wasteland of northern Canada, the deserts of Mexico, or the jungles of South America, the country of America had relatively the same climate as Europe. This attracted many Europeans. The distance from Europe also allowed for the freedom to express new ideas. Some of these were just downright medieval Puritans. However, many others, like the Quakers, were forward-thinking. These radical new ideas and a new tax would culminate into the American Revolution and the birth of the nation. Now, America could have had its fate sealed as just a medium-sized country on the Atlantic coast, but, luckily, the Industrial Revolution happened and made trains that could pass through the Appalachian Mountains. By the time America had expanded to its current size, it had very favorable geography. It had the Mississippi Basin as its connection throughout the Midwest, the second and third largest lakes, and an abundance of fertile land. America had even acquired far-off regions, such as the strategically located and future tourist hub, Hawaii, and the connection to the Arctic and filled with oil, Alaska. The U.S. is flanked on two sides by the two largest oceans, which both protect it and open it up for trade. Now, that might have been an example of how geography has helped a country, so now let's look at how geography has screwed a country over. Meet Chad. He likes to get drunk and hit on girls and... Oh, wrong Chad. No, we are talking about the North African country of Chad. The country is located smack dab landlocked in the Sahara with no major rivers. I mean, it does have a little fertile land down south, nothing too fancy. Also, its neighbors aren't exactly the best, so yeah. Well, at least you're only third worst in human development, Chad. Alright, so now that we know the advantages and disadvantages of geography, let's create our own perfect country. So, in order to be prosperous, this country gotta be big. But not too big, probably the size of Australia. In terms of location, let's have it be like Turkey. Two peninsulas, that way it has control of an important strait, and there should be mountains or rivers on the borders with the country's two neighbors. In terms of climate, it should be around between South Carolina and Massachusetts. That way the land is great for agriculture, and not too cold and not too hot. Also, lots of rivers that are all connected would be great. The country should be relatively flat to make trains and highways easier. The country should have natural resources, but not too much, as this encourages long-term prosperity and economic diversification. The neighbors should be much weaker allies to this nation. The continent the nation is in should be newly discovered like the Americas to allow for freedom. Finally, sprinkle in a few colonial possessions and bam, you've got yourself a superpower. So I hope you guys liked that video. It, especially the US part, was inspired by the book Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall. Great book. So thanks for watching, and remember to hit that subscribe button. The Rhine and the Danube River. Yo, so right now we're trying to find the Buttermilk Falls. Beautiful river though, can't go swimming in it because of algae though.